the J.J. Pickle Federal Building in Austin, Texas. It's named after a long-standing Democratic congressman from Texas. It was built for government workers using your tax dollars. We think you'll agree when you look at it, it's a stunningly unattractive and depressing piece of construction. And unfortunately, it's not alone. This is the U.S. federal building in the city of San Francisco. The architect who designed it, Tom Main, calls it a balance of poetry and pragmatics. That ought to be the first tip that, like so many celebrity architects, Main is a transparent fraud. The building isn't poetic or, for that matter, pragmatic. It's hideous. There's no other word for it. It degrades rather than elevates the government it represents. That's not surprising, though, given who designed it. After the deaths of more than 3,000 Americans on 9/11, Main said this, quote, "I could make a better case for justifying the terror than the other way around. I'm completely out of sync with America." That's for sure. His buildings prove it. But the federal government didn't care, or maybe that was the appeal. Maine's monstrosity in San Francisco cost taxpayers $144 million. Here in Washington, meanwhile, ugly government buildings are as common as the mentally ill homeless who live outside them. Employees of the Departments of Labor, Education, and Energy are stuck in brutalist piles that make you wince as you drive by. Who would design a building that evokes dread in everyone who looks at it? Well, petty authoritarians who hate other people and want them to suffer. That's the only possible explanation for this. Take a look at the headquarters of the Department of Health and Human Services next time you're in D.C., and you'll feel the same way, sick to your stomach. If you can handle it, walk from there, HHS, to the J. Edgar Hoover Building on 9th and Pennsylvania Avenue. This is the headquarters of the FBI, America's most powerful law enforcement agency. The building is a shocking expression of hostility to all things human and beautiful. It looks like a political prison in downtown Pyongyang. Actually, no, it's too ugly for North Korea. Seriously, it is. Look it up. We are not exaggerating at all. It's that awful. The question is, why do we have public buildings like this in our country? And more to the point, why don't we recognize the psychic damage they inflict? Beauty matters. Every person longs for it. To be trapped in a windowless concrete trapezoid for 8 hours a day is a form of torture. Bad design is a blight on the society that allows it. It crushes every soul. Every culture in the world recognizes this and always has recognized it. America did too until about 1946, when a generation of men accustomed to living in barracks and Quonset huts returned from the war and started designing buildings. Unfortunately, American architecture has never recovered. If anything, it's gotten worse, more corporate and abstract and aggressively indifferent to aesthetics. This is not a small problem. Design is an expression of a society's values, as well as its history, its culture, its customs. Imagine flying to Rome and finding that all the medieval churches had been replaced by one-story cinder block boxes that looked like Jiffy Lube. That would be ugly, but it also wouldn't be Rome anymore. When a nation cares about its history, its buildings reflect it. Clearly, our ruling class openly hates this country. No wonder they keep falling for phonies like Tom Main and Frank Gehry. Absurd. Our leaders don't care about our culture. Their only consistent principle is narcissism themselves. So of course they're easily fooled by fast-talking rip-off artists selling the next new thing. When a billionaire pays $100 million for a Jackson Pollock splotch, he's only embarrassing himself. But when the government spends $1 billion on postmodern garbage architecture, it hurts all of us. It doesn't have to be this way. Soon, hopefully, it won't be this way. A draft executive order making its way through the White House right now would prohibit the construction of any more government buildings that are garbage. The order would mandate that all federal buildings adhere to a classical architectural style. The style, by the way, reflected in the U.S. Capitol, in the Supreme Court, in all the other monuments that our citizens travel to Washington, D.C. to see. The executive order has received, of course, basically no attention in the media. It's not related to Russia, so they don't care. But you should care. It's one of the single most important things we can do to improve our physical environment, and hence our lives. This is a great country. It deserves to be a beautiful country. Chris Bedford has thought seriously about this. Why does this matter?
Because we are surrounded by it. It matters because the buildings around you are what instill pride, what connect you with your ancestors, which things that lift up the human mind and the human eye even to greater things. They ennoble us. And there's a whole class of America, a whole class of the world that doesn't believe in truth. They don't believe in objectivity, and they no longer believe in beauty. Not only that, but just like in politics and in art, the architects here insist that since they are the only ones allowed to make decisions, we're not allowed to have any input, and they're the only ones who have any input or any idea of what's good and what's bad. How dare we rubes question their judgment here? That's what this order would seek to undo, and it would actually give the people and the government a seat at the table for the architecture that is our public architecture.
Amen. So quickly, I just wonder, like this, we're not talking about bad taste. Lots of people have bad taste. Most of us do sometimes. This is aggressively hostile. This is architecture designed to make you feel bad. Why would anyone ever build something like that? I
mean, the federal courthouse that is built in Oregon, the architect reportedly designed guillotines over the benches that the public is supposed to sit in. Obviously, no one sits there. If you go to L'Enfant Plaza, which is a tribute, supposedly, to the architect of Washington, D.C., it's so ugly, it's completely barren. But it's because they're completely obsessed with themselves. They call it poetic. They use all these different languages. Exactly. They say transparent or democratic, when it's none of those things.
It's the opposite, of course. Chris Bedford, thank you for caring about this and writing about it so eloquently. It matters a lot.